Have you ever wondered about the people who stand in the shadows of history? The ones whose courage shapes the world, yet their names are whispered rather than shouted? Today, we're going to uncover one such story from the pages of Scripture. A story about a young girl who played a crucial role in God's plan. A story about faith, leadership, and the lessons that come from both triumph and correction. This is the biblical story of Miriam. And by the end of this journey, you'll understand why her story matters just as much today as it did thousands of years ago. Long ago, in the ancient land of Egypt, beneath the shadow of towering pyramids and along the fertile banks of the mighty Nile River, the Hebrew people lived as slaves. The scripture tells us they had grown numerous and strong, multiplying greatly in the land where their ancestor Joseph had once served as a great ruler. But those days of favor had long passed, and a new pharaoh had risen to power, one who did not know Joseph and had no memory of how this Hebrew man had saved Egypt from 7 years of famine. This new king looked upon the growing Hebrew population with fear and suspicion. The Bible records his words to his people, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass, that, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land." Fear drove this pharaoh to make the lives of the Hebrews bitter with hard bondage. They were forced to build treasure cities for Pharaoh, working in mortar and brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service was with rigor, harsh and unrelenting. The scripture tells us that the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, which only increased Pharaoh's anxiety. In his growing desperation, this king made a decree that would strike terror into the heart of every Hebrew family. He commanded the Hebrew midwives, saying, "When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live." When the midwives feared God more than Pharaoh and refused to carry out this evil command, the king issued an even more terrible decree to all his people: "Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive." The Nile River, which had always been Egypt's source of life and prosperity, was now to become a grave for Hebrew children. This cruel edict brought anguish to every Hebrew household, where parents lived in constant fear for their sons. It was during this dark and terrible period that a man from the house of Levi, the priestly tribe of Israel, took as his wife a daughter of Levi. The scripture records that this woman conceived and bore a son. When she looked upon her newborn child, she saw that he was a goodly child, beautiful and perfect in every way. Despite the king's decree and the danger it represented, her mother's heart could not surrender this precious life to the waters of death. For 3 months, she managed to hide her son, no doubt using every means at her disposal to keep him safe and quiet. But as he grew stronger and his voice grew louder, the task became increasingly difficult and dangerous. The Bible tells us that when she could no longer hide him, she made a desperate decision born of both faith and love. She took an ark of bulrushes, weaving it carefully from the papyrus reeds that grew along the Nile's edge. With meticulous care, she daubed it with slime and pitch, waterproofing this tiny vessel that would carry her most precious cargo. Into this small ark, she placed her beautiful son, and with a breaking heart, she carried it to the river's edge and laid it among the flags and reeds where the water was calm. But this mother did not abandon her child to chance alone. The scripture records that his sister stood afar off, positioning herself where she could watch to know what would be done to him. This sister was Miriam, though the Bible does not name her in this particular account of the rescue. As the morning sun climbed higher over the great river, something remarkable began to unfold. Pharaoh's daughter came down to wash herself at the river, accompanied by her maidens who walked along the riverside. In God's perfect timing, her eyes fell upon the unusual sight of the small ark floating among the flags at the water's edge. The princess sent her maid to fetch the curious vessel, and when it was brought to her, she opened it with her own hands. Inside, she discovered a beautiful Hebrew baby, and the child wept. The scripture records that she had compassion on him, her heart moved by the sight of this helpless infant. Looking upon him, she declared, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." At this critical moment, when the fate of the child hung in the balance, his sister stepped forward. With remarkable boldness and wisdom beyond her years, Miriam approached the most powerful woman in Egypt. The scripture records her words, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" The suggestion was both practical and ingenious. Pharaoh's daughter would need someone to care for and feed the infant, and who better than a Hebrew woman who could provide the nourishment he needed? The princess agreed to this proposal, and immediately the young girl went and called the child's mother. When the woman arrived, Pharaoh's daughter spoke to her with authority and kindness. "Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." Thus, through God's providence and a young girl's quick thinking, the very mother who had placed her son in the river was now employed by Pharaoh's own daughter to care for him, and she would be paid for the privilege of raising her own child. The woman took the child and nursed him, caring for him in his early years and no doubt teaching him about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When the child grew and was weaned, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son in the royal household. The princess called his name Moses, explaining, "Because I drew him out of the water." Thus began the remarkable life of the man who would become Israel's greatest deliverer, preserved through the courage and quick thinking of his sister Miriam and raised with full knowledge of his Hebrew heritage even while living in the palace of Egypt. Many years passed, and Moses grew to manhood in Pharaoh's house, educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and mighty in words and deeds. But his heart remained with his oppressed people. After defending a Hebrew slave and killing an Egyptian taskmaster, Moses fled to the land of Midian, where he spent 40 years as a shepherd. During these long years of exile, God was preparing his chosen deliverer for the great work ahead. At the burning bush on Mount Horeb, the Lord appeared to Moses and called him to return to Egypt with a divine commission. "Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people the children of Israel out of Egypt." Moses returned to Egypt, accompanied by his brother Aaron, who would serve as his spokesman. Together, they went before Pharaoh with God's demand, "Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness." When Pharaoh refused, God demonstrated his power through 10 devastating plagues that struck at the very heart of Egyptian religion and power. The Nile turned to blood. Frogs covered the land. Lice and flies swarmed. Livestock died. Boils afflicted man and beast. Hail destroyed the crops. Locusts devoured what remained. Darkness covered the land for 3 days. And finally, the firstborn of Egypt died in a single night, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive in the dungeon. After this final, terrible plague, Pharaoh's resistance was broken. He called for Moses and Aaron in the night and said, "Rise up, and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also." The Israelites departed from Egypt in great haste, a multitude of people carrying the wealth of Egypt with them as payment for their years of unpaid labor. But their freedom was short-lived, for Pharaoh soon regretted his decision and pursued them with his army. The children of Israel found themselves in an impossible situation, trapped between Pharaoh's approaching forces and the waters of the Red Sea. The people cried out in fear and despair, but Moses stood firm in faith, telling them, "Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will shew to you today." Then occurred one of the greatest miracles recorded in Scripture. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, making the sea dry land and dividing the waters. The children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, with the waters forming a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The pursuing Egyptians followed them into the midst of the sea with their horses, chariots, and horsemen. But in the morning watch, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud and troubled their host. He took off their chariot wheels so that they drove them heavily. As the Israelites reached the far shore, Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea again, and the waters returned to their strength. The sea covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them alive. Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. In this moment of complete deliverance, when the impossible had become reality and their enemies lay defeated beneath the waves, the people burst into celebration and worship. It was at this triumphant moment that Miriam stepped fully into her role as a prophetess and worship leader. The scripture gives her the title, Miriam the Prophetess, the sister of Aaron, acknowledging her spiritual authority and calling. She took a timbrel in her hand, and her leadership was immediately recognized, for all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. Miriam's voice rose above the celebration as she led the women in a song of victory and praise. The scripture records her words, "Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea." This was not merely a song of celebration but a prophetic declaration of God's mighty power and deliverance. The scene must have been magnificent. Hundreds of Hebrew women, recently freed from slavery, dancing and singing with instruments, led by a prophetess whose voice proclaimed God's triumph over their enemies. Miriam's song became part of the great victory celebration that marked Israel's birth as a free nation. This moment established Miriam as one of the key leaders of Israel, alongside her brothers Moses and Aaron. The prophet Micah would later confirm this, declaring God's words to Israel, "For I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed thee out of the house of servants, and I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam." This biblical testimony places Miriam among the triumvirate of leaders whom God raised up to guide his people from slavery to freedom. The journey through the wilderness that followed was long and arduous, lasting 40 years as the people wandered toward the promised land. During this time, Miriam served as a prophetess and leader, particularly among the women of Israel. Though the scripture does not record many details of her daily ministry, her position as one of the three primary leaders indicates her ongoing importance in guiding and instructing the people. However, even the greatest leaders face moments of testing and failure. The Bible honestly records such a moment in Miriam's life, showing us that spiritual leadership does not guarantee perfection. Numbers chapter 12 tells us that Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. Their criticism went beyond this personal matter to challenge Moses' unique authority, as they said, "Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us?" The Lord heard their words of complaint. God's response was swift and decisive. He called all three siblings to come out unto the tabernacle of the congregation. The Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle, calling specifically for Aaron and Miriam to step forward. When they approached, God spoke to them directly, defending Moses and explaining his unique relationship with the Almighty. The Lord declared, "Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I the Lord will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" The gravity of their offense was made clear through divine judgment. As the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. This was a devastating affliction, not only physically but spiritually and socially, as leprosy rendered a person ceremonially unclean and required separation from the community. Aaron, horrified at seeing his sister's condition, immediately appealed to Moses, "Alas, my lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he cometh out of his mother's womb." Moses' response revealed his great heart and his role as an intercessor. Despite being the target of their criticism, he immediately cried unto the Lord on Miriam's behalf, "Heal her now, O God, I beseech thee." The Lord heard Moses' prayer but explained that restoration would require a period of discipline and purification. He said, "If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again." So Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, a period of separation and reflection on her error. Remarkably, the scripture tells us that the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. This demonstrates the high regard in which she was held by the entire congregation, who waited for her restoration before continuing their journey. After 7 days, Miriam was healed and restored to her place among the people and to her role as a prophetess and leader. This experience of discipline and restoration became part of her testimony, showing that even great leaders must maintain humility and that God's correction comes from love and leads to healing. Miriam continued to serve alongside Moses and Aaron throughout the remaining years of wilderness wandering. Though the scripture doesn't provide detailed accounts of her activities during this period, her continued status as one of the 3 principal leaders suggests her ongoing ministry among the people. As the 40 years of wandering drew toward their end, Miriam's earthly journey concluded. The Bible records her death with simple dignity. Then came the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, into the desert of Zin in the 1st month, and the people abode in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. Like Moses, Miriam died in the wilderness, never setting foot in the promised land toward which she had led the people for 4 decades. Yet her faithfulness was complete, her service rendered to the end, her legacy established in the hearts of the people and in the pages of Scripture. Significantly, immediately after recording Miriam's death, the Bible states, "And there was no water for the congregation, and the people gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron." While the text doesn't explicitly connect these events, the timing suggests that Miriam's presence had been a source of blessing that was deeply felt when removed. From the banks of the Nile where she watched over her baby brother to the desert where she was buried, Miriam's life spanned the great redemptive narrative of Israel's deliverance from slavery to the threshold of the Promised Land. She was witness to the greatest miracles in Hebrew history, participant in the defining moments of her nation's birth, and faithful servant through 4 decades of wilderness wandering. The scripture preserves her story as a testament to God's use of women in leadership, the importance of worship and praise in the life of faith, the necessity of humility before divine authority, and the power of God's grace to restore those who stumble. Miriam the prophetess remains an enduring example of faithful service, devoted leadership, and the complex humanity of all who serve the Lord. So there you have it, the biblical story of Miriam as recorded in the pages of Scripture. A story that spans from Exodus through Numbers, showing us a woman of faith, courage, and genuine humanity. If this story has moved you, if it's helped you understand more about God's use of women in leadership, or if you've been encouraged by the themes of restoration and faithfulness, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What part of Miriam's biblical story spoke to you the most? How do her experiences with both triumph and correction encourage you in your own faith journey? Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this exploration of one of Scripture's remarkable women. And if you want to hear more incredible stories straight from the pages of the Bible, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Remember, the Bible is filled with stories of real people who faced real challenges and experienced real encounters with God. Their stories are preserved to teach us, encourage us, and show us what it means to walk faithfully with the Lord through every season of life. Until next time, stay in the Word, stay encouraged, and keep growing in your understanding of God's amazing plan as revealed in Scripture.